Hi, and welcome to the unveiling of the cleveland.com high school football top 25 preseason poll for 2014. I'm Joe Noga from the Northeast Ohio Media Group, and I'm joined by Scott Patsko, and we're going to run through the top 25. And in addition, this year we have polls for Division 3 and 4 and Divisions 5, 6, and 7. Scott, why don't you take us through how we arrived at this point in the preseason where we're ready to unveil these top teams?
We're doing things a little different this year. I think in the past our polls were done through a debate and discussion process. This year we have a larger staff, larger number of people focusing on high school sports, so we're going to have a voting process. We have 8 members of our staff who have gone through and voted on their top 25. And then we slot everybody according to a point system, similar to what the Associated Press does. The team with the most points is number 1, and everybody kind of falls in line after that. Another new thing we're doing is our Division 3-4 poll and Division 5-6-7 polls. We wanted to give people an idea of top 10s in those divisions, because our top 25 is usually dominated by Division 1 and 2 schools. So this gives people a chance to see how those smaller schools match up with each other. For all of our polls, you'll see all of our ballots. And you'll also, for the top 25, you'll kind of get an explanation of why we came to some of our decisions. So those are kind of some of the big changes that we've done this year with our rankings. And
throughout the season, while we're unveiling these polls today, right now on Wednesday before the start of the regular season, throughout the regular season, look for the top 25 poll to come out each Monday, and the Division 3 and 4 poll, top 10, to come out on Tuesday, and the Division 5, 6, and 7 poll to come out on Wednesday. That'll be a regular feature that we'll put out each Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So whichever category your team falls under, make sure you look for it then. All right, Scott, let's get to it. Let's start with the bottom 5 of our top 25 poll. Also, before we do that, I just want to remind you, if you're watching along, if you're tweeting, if you're in the comments section on this post, hashtag NEOVarsity. We've got the iPads here. We can get a couple of comments from you, respond to a couple of your questions. Feel free, as we're rolling out these polls, to leave us your comments and leave us your opinions, which ones we got right and which ones we didn't. Let's start at the bottom and work up to the top here. The bottom 5 teams we have in a tie for 25th. We actually have 26 teams in our first top 25 poll. Chagrin Falls and Solon tie for 25th with 13 points each. Madison, Villa Angela, St. Joseph, Avon Lake, and defending Division 6 state champion Kirtland checks in at 21. Scott, just give us a couple of thoughts on a team that really stands out for you in this bottom 5.
I think the first thing that sticks out to me is the fact we have 2 Division 6 teams down there with Kirtland and VASJ. VASJ, I think, is a team that a lot of people, I think, are excited to see this year, because they went from the 1-9 season to last year making the playoffs. You have Trey Williams back, Marvell Ross. You got a lineman, bigger, stronger, faster this year. I think a lot of people are expecting big things from them in that division, and they're just a fun team to watch. Ross, I think, can score a touchdown anytime he touches the ball. It'll be interesting to see how they progress when you get to the end of the season, and I know for one I'm looking forward to a possible playoff matchup between them and Kirtland. During our media day, though, we did ask Trey Williams about what teams he's looking forward to playing this season.
Can I say 2?
Sure, absolutely.
I would say Kirtland.
Okay.
And Cleveland Central Catholic. Kirtland won because they've had tremendous success the past couple of seasons. They like the top dog, so of course we want to come out and have a good game against them. Cleveland Central Catholic, that's just like one of our rivals, so that's the game everybody's excited for. We know players on their team. I know Coach Story know Coach Lundy pretty well, and just know it's going to be a great game. Can I say 2?
Now, for me, at the bottom of this poll, the bottom 5 teams, I would say Solon, who was a qualifying team in Division 1, Region 1 last year for the playoffs. They returned 8 starters on defense, including John Sensabaugh, had 107 tackles. You got Tyrese Seals at defensive end. You throw in Alex Brown and Drew Fox, and that's really a top 25 defensive unit. The real question for Solon, to me, is who's going to step in at quarterback. You've got two seniors, Ryan Gallagher and Matt Lobsher. Looks like Gallagher is going to get the start there. Lobsher is going to play at some point, and it just really remains to be seen if their offense is going to do enough to keep them in that top 25 poll throughout the rest of the season. Scott, looking at this bottom five and looking at some of these other teams that received votes for the top 25 poll, who's a team that you think can jump up and get into that top 25 sometime in the season?
Yeah, quite a few other teams that received votes. If you saw in the first slide on the bottom half of this the poll there were quite a few that did get votes from our panel. Strongsville, for me, is one that could. They're playing in a tough conference. The NOC is always tough top to bottom, and I think that's a group that has been kind of hyped, that senior class, for a couple of years now. I know former coach Russ Jakes talked about them a lot and was really looking forward to them getting to that senior year. They have a lot of seniors led by Bobby Cole at quarterback, 3-year starter. So that's a team that I think has a chance because they have those games there that if they win, it's going to be impressive. And I think that's going to sway some of the voters to get them in there.
And for me, a team that can crack that top 25, Garfield Heights, another NOC team, this time in the Lake Division. Right now, a couple of question marks. Jameel Miller, their outstanding senior quarterback, who's also plays defensive back, is on the shelf for a couple of weeks with a leg injury. They've still got a really solid defense. Anthony Kostelik is a linebacker who had over 100 tackles, and I think that's a team that, given their schedule, there are opportunities on that schedule for them to win some big games and impress some voters and move up in the poll.
All right, well, let's move on to the next group of players, the next group of teams, 16 through 20. As you'll see, I think throughout this poll, we're going to have a few ties. That's the way it shakes out during the voting. But in 16 through 19, you're looking at teams such as Elyria at 16. And you got Mayfield, Brunswick's in there as well. So again, a couple of NOC teams. You're going to see quite a few of those in our top 25. Kent Roosevelt comes in at 19, tied with Brunswick, and then Aurora, which out of the CBC at 18. What team kind of sticks out to you?
Well, for me, Mayfield checking in at 17. You've got Mario Monastero coming back at quarterback. He put up 2,200 yards and 20 touchdowns as a sophomore last year. You've got Andy Isabella in the backfield. He's a state track, speed kind of guy who's moving back to tailback for full time this year. He also factors in the passing game there. The big question is going to be their defense. They were up and down last year. They were 5-5 and missed the playoffs, just barely missed the playoffs. Mayfield's defense is really going to have to sort of find itself early in the season, and they get a super huge test right out the gate in Nordonia in week 1. That's a game that if they can win, they will not be at 17 for very long if they can come out on top of that in that Nordonia game. We did talk to head coach Larry Pinto of Mayfield during our media days. We asked Larry about his defense, and this is what he said.
Well, we have a group of young linebackers. We have 3 juniors, or 2 juniors, a sophomore and a senior, will be competing. I think they all can play pretty well. So they'll probably be like situational players on certain downs, run downs. We might have a couple guys in, and pass downs we may make some substitution. But right now, with our 10 days in the summer, we're able to use. We feel very comfortable at what's going on at linebacker. We got 2 veteran safeties back and one of our starting corners back, and we're just trying to create some depth with our other corner. And through the passing scrimmages we've had this summer, I like what I see. Well, we have a group.
Kent Roosevelt, I think, is another team to point out. You had John Nemec retiring after almost 30 years. Tim King comes in, former defensive coordinator there. I think a lot of people maybe not sure what to expect out of Kent Roosevelt. They graduated a lot of seniors, but at the same time, they're a team that's kind of dominated in the PTC Metro and been a return qualifier for the playoffs. So I don't know how long they're going to stay at 19. I think that's one team, at least for me. I'm looking forward to seeing how they go through the first 3 weeks to just find out if that's a team we should keep an eye on and possibly move higher as we go forward.
Okay, so we're through the bottom 10 or so teams in this poll. I just want to remind you guys, if you're following along, watching the video on Twitter, in the comments there, leave us a comment, hashtag NEOVarsity. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can throughout the show here. And then continue it after the show's done. When the post is up there, go ahead and leave your thoughts, leave your ballot. Tell us who you think should be number one in the top 25 poll. Let's keep going here and go to the next group of 5 in the top 25 poll. We will start with number 14, and at number 14 we've got a sort of an NOC, Northeast Ohio Conference Division tie. 14 Stowe and Brush, both with 91 points. Then moving up to 13, Brecksville was a Division II playoff qualifier last year, as well as Highland at number 12 and Bedford at number 1, just outside the top 10, 119 points for the Bearcats. I'm going to take a look at Brush here. This is a team in Division II, Region 3. It's got potential, Bowl Division college talent up and down the roster. Jordan Overton is a junior. He factored in the passing game last year for Coach Josh Wells, and this year they might be moving him back a little bit, take a few snaps in the backfield at tailback. He's a guy who's not going to come off the field. You've got Brush has 4 out of 4 defensive backfield starters returning. Laquan White had 5 interceptions last year. Up front, they've got Tyrone Chambers. He's 6'5", he's 325 pounds, and a sophomore. That's a ridiculously large person. And he's going to affect games just by his presence in the middle of the field. I think Brush has sort of that softer schedule towards the end of the season. They're going to have to impress us early to stay where they are in the poll, maybe move up a little higher. Winning, going 5-0 in the NOC Lake Division.
Dominated it recently.
I think they've only lost in the last 3 years. I think they've only lost once, and that was to Garfield Heights back in like 2012 or 11. I just think Brush is a team to definitely keep an eye on in Division II, Region 3. We asked Coach Josh Wells when they were in for media days what players are key, not just for making the playoffs this year, but for having that deep playoff run.
Two teams that are losing prolific quarterbacks from last year. And in Brecksville's case, it's 2 years in a row. They are down to 1 Tupa. I don't know if that's enough, but they do have Danny Cirillo moving into quarterback. Brecksville's a team that just always seems to be solid. Even when they have a season that maybe doesn't, have 3 or 4 losses or something, it's still, I guess, you'd say they underachieved because, it's a team that you kind of expect to do well. Last year, I think you could say that they were a team that it seemed like they could beat anybody at any time. They took Hudson to overtime. They handled Avon Lake really well in the SWC. So I'm really interested in seeing how things go this year with some new faces in there. And again, you're moving into another quarterback, and that's going to cause a learning curve with them. Right. Let's move on to the top 10. The teams here, I think are all in contention for moving up into the top 5 at some time this season. But we can start with number 10. You have Cleveland Heights, followed or topped by St. Vincent St. Mary, last year's poll winner. Then you have Avon at number 8, Glenville, which comes in at number 7, and then of course Benedictine, another I think a trendy pick in our poll at number 6. I wanted to mention Avon because for me that's a team that is always right there. Last year they were right outside the top 5. I don't think they got into it last season, but they're a team that they don't have to rebuild, they just reload, and they've gotten to the point now as a program where they just always seem to be good, and they've dominated the West Shore. They'll be leaving that after this season, but with a couple of juniors and Jake Sopko and Garrett Choate back, and they have some work to do on the line, but that's a team I think you can expect to see win a lot of games and go fairly deep in the playoffs again. During media days, though, we did ask Mike Elter about how he sustained that success over the last 7 or 8 years at Avon, and this is what he said.
Well, we graduated a lot of really good players, and So every year it kind of happens, and you, as a coach, scratch your head and say, how are we going to replace those guys? They were really good. But it's fun to watch kids just take ownership in the program and in the tradition. And a lot of guys wait till their senior year to get their first opportunity. So we have 23 seniors on our football team. Not all of them have been starters, but we have 23 of them, and that's our strength. We're going to be as good as our seniors make us.
Another team in that just outside the top 5 is St. Vincent St. Mary, like Scott mentioned, last season's poll champion, and it was back-to-back Division III state titles. Written a lot about the talent that has moved on from that program. Dante Booker, Paris Campbell Jr. But they have some senior class here that's got a winning tradition. They've been in the title game the last 2 years, so. You look at a guy like a Vince Lockett, who now takes over as the #1 guy, the feature back in the backfield. Jeremy Swords is going to be the guy on really both sides of the line who's going to be asked to sort of solidify and make sure the guys around him are all on the same page. Dan Borman lost a lot of talent. It would not surprise me to see St. Vincent St. Mary take a few stumbles and maybe not be around the top 10 this year, but that program has shown there's winning and it breeds winning, and there's always a chance that they could stay very highly ranked in that poll.
Before we get to the top 5, I want to, switch gears a little bit and go to our small school polls. As I said before, we have Division 3-4 top 10 and also Division 5-6-7. The thinking behind that is we want to show, how those teams match up against each other. Like I said, the Division 1 and 2 teams typically dominate our top 25. So this is a way to kind of see how some of those smaller schools match up. Let's take a look at our Division 3-4 top 10. You're going to see a couple easy choices there at the top, as Benedictine and St. Vincent St. Mary, the only teams to get first place votes. Aurora, Sugar and Falls are also in our top 25. Kenston did receive some votes for our top 25. And then you see the rounding out the top 10, the rest of the teams there. Joe, I know you wanted to talk a little more about Benedictine. I think, like I said before, they seem to be a trendy pick in our top 25.
Yeah, and I sort of anticipated that they might be a unanimous pick in this top 10 poll as the #1 team coming out, just based on the experience that they have coming back. You've got a Florida recruit in Jerome Baker, pretty much widely regarded as the #1 linebacking prospect in the state. Don't forget, though, he also rushed for 1,500 yards and 27 touchdowns as a junior. So this is a kid you're going to have to decide whether you want to stop the running game, which could also feature Dantes Rash, who's a junior, who's also drawing major college interest. Load up in the box and stop them, then you leave Justin Lane, who's a 6'3" junior on the outside. And by the way, you've got Brian Scheffler, who's in his 3rd year starting as a junior, and he threw for 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns last year. Expect those numbers to go way up this year. This is a team very, very much like St. Vincent St. Mary last year and the year before, had that young talent, and they were really able to put it together. If Coach Schaefer is able to put that together, and we did talk to Coach Joe Schaefer at Media Days about entering the season with those expectations, and this is what he said.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the area we have to continue to develop in is just our depth. Mm-hmm. And that was these guys will tell you that was our focus through our 10 practices that we got this summer, was building, from first teamers all the way down to our fourth teamers, and making sure everybody was getting reps. We did a great job of it this June and July, and we need to continue to do that so that when somebody's number is called, they're ready to roll.
All right, I just want to remind you guys, if you're following along, in the comments and on Twitter, go ahead and tweet at NEOVarsity. We will respond to any questions you have. Also, you can, in the comments, leave your ideas and who you think is missing or whatever in the top 25 poll.
Let's move on to the Division 5, 6, and 7 top 10 and take a look at those teams. Again, you'll see Kirtland at #1, receiving 7 first-place votes. VASJ got 1 first-place vote, about 8 points separating them there. Manchester, I think, was just outside of our top 25. Mm-hmm. And then you have Beechwood. Mogador, I was kind of surprised they come in at #7. I had them a little higher in my ballot, but they're in the top 10 there, and you can see the rest. Kirtland, I think, for me, is an easy choice for number one. 3 straight state titles, defending Division VI champ. I know it was easy for me to put them in the number one spot. We have Adam Hess coming back. You have Sam Skilgen under center. A lot of running power there that they had last season. I know they have some work to do on the lines, but it's Kirtland, and I have confidence that they're going to find those kids. I think as we go forward, having Villa Angela St. Joseph move up and take over that number one spot, they were kind of handled by Mogador in the playoffs, and then Mogador was kind of handled by Kirtland in the playoffs. That's a big gap to make up. I don't know if they can, but I'm looking forward to seeing if they can. And again, like I said before, I think a matchup in the playoffs between those two teams would be excellent.
That's a great sort of area developing into sort of maybe a little rivalry there with those teams that you mentioned, Mogador included in that as well. Just fun to watch for the smaller schools in the lower divisions this year to see the competition be really there. So now we've reached the top group in our top 25 poll. This is that coveted sort of top 25 area. Last year, like Scott said, it was tough to crack in, and it sort of seemed like it was the same group of teams. This year, maybe a new face has cropped up there, but let's go into the top 5. Features Nordonia at number 5, 162 points. Nordonia is sort of the, I want to say the sexy pick in Division II. I think a couple of teams have, or a couple of services or media groups have picked them as preseason number 1 in Division II. They've got a lot of talent and a lot of speed, and a quarterback in David Murray who's coming back and has experience. Number 4 on the list, St. Ignatius, 178 points. Pretty much no surprise that we would have St. Ignatius in the top 5 at some point, here early in the season. Just really a matter of where that would be. Defending Division I runner-up from a year ago, Menor checks in at number 3, 186 points. Really sort of a surprise for me in that Menor would be 3 in the point totals, but if you look at the separation here, 187 points for number 2 Hudson. To me, that was sort of a little bit of a surprise that Hudson jumped up above Menor, just based on Menor's consistency over the last 5 years of being in that top 5. And then the unanimous number 1 choice at number 1 among all of our writers, St. Edward, 8 first place votes. Scott, tell us a little bit about St. Edward.
Even last year, as they were going through the season and having success, I think a lot of people looked forward to 2014 because of all the juniors that they had playing major roles on that squad. They get to the state semifinal. So that experience and knowing all the talent that they have coming back, I think made it an easy choice. You have a boatload of Division I recruits. You have Brett Keene, you have Alex Stump at wide receiver, Sean Crawford, the Dowells, Andrew and David. You have their whole linebacking core. It's I think as talented a team as we've seen. And the thing with them going forward is how they handle all that pressure, outside noise of rankings. They're at the top of our poll. They're at the top of a lot of national polls as well. And that's actually one thing that we asked Rick Finati about when they were here for our media day. How do you get your team to kind of tune out all that extra stuff? And this is what he had to say.
I think the strength comes from who's returning, and that happens to be the skill areas, But not only are those guys returning, Andrew was running back last year. Well, now we're asking him to do more. We're asking him to play some safety, continue his role on special teams, and also run the ball. Ben played most of his games last year at offensive line and played some at defensive line. Now we're asking him to do both well. So, each year our seniors, I feel sometimes it's like, okay, you guys did great, but now there's more to it. There's more, and it's just the way they've taken the challenge. They've taken it tremendously. They've accepted this challenge and to be a St. Edward player. And I got to give Ben credit. I think that's really the motivating factor. You just got to take it one day at a time. Get better today. And tomorrow, we'll worry about it tomorrow. Get better tomorrow. Take it day by day. Well,
one of the things I did want to mention too is Hudson and Mentor. My top 5, I think, mirrored the eventual top 5, and the reason I wanted Hudson over Mentor. I think Hudson kind of knows who its leaders are going into this season because they have so many seniors coming back. With Mentor, I kind of anticipate them having a season similar to last year, at least in the beginning, where they're kind of trying to find their way a little bit, especially with the quarterback position. I guess that was what got Hudson ahead for me, and I think some of the other people on our staff probably felt the same way.
Well, you look at Hudson, they've got Mitch Godani coming back in at quarterback, and in high school football, everybody knows if you've got that really good, solid senior leader quarterback, that's enough to move people up ahead, at least one spot in the poll. And Mentor's got Jake Floria, is a transfer from Lake Catholic, and he's taking over. It might take.
Hasn't played varsity yet.
Right, hasn't played. It might take a little bit of adjustment period, but as we saw last year with Connor Krasancic taking over that quarterback position, that adjustment period lasted probably about 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and then he was off like a racehorse and won Player of the Year for us. So
I think in Nordonia too, I jumped on the bandwagon. They have so much coming back. Last year they got off such a great start and they just were steamrolling teams. And then they got to the end of the season and kind of stumbled those last 2 weeks, and then they get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. I imagine Nordonia is going to be there high in our ranking throughout this season. I think that the key for them will be what happens there at the end of the year. Do they stumble again? Do they find a way to get past that and maybe move up, and challenge for a higher spot in our top 5?
Okay, we have a couple of comments here on Twitter, #NEOVarsity. Sebastian Montoya checks in. He wants to know about Benedictine. He says if Benny runs the table, can they be considered for number 1 despite being a Division IV team? Benny's a team that we're probably going to see, even if they do stumble at some point during the season, in that Division III-IV poll, they're going to be at the top 1 or 2 of that regardless. Right. Do they have a chance to crack into that top 5?
I started out with a lot of my smaller schools lower in my poll than most people. I think everybody had Benedictine in their top 10. I had them lower, closer to 20. I guess I want to see the smaller school kind of prove it during the season, and I know they have that game against Bedford in week 3, which I think will tell us a lot about what level they're at. Obviously, they have a ton of talent and they're an excellent team, but when you start talking about size of roster and 2A players and smaller schools, I think you have to take that into account. So can they move up? I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to see how they do against the big schools like a Bedford and how impressive it is if they do win.
And jumping back, like talking a little bit about the smaller schools, Mike Kamen here had a tweet. Very few returning players for Roosevelt. Interesting that they're up there that high for you. I'm going to defer to you as the Kent Roosevelt expert here, but
I think with anything in the preseason poll, you're a lot of times you're going on faith, so to speak. We watch these teams in the preseason, we know what they have coming back, and you're right. Kent Roosevelt does have a lot of holes to fill, and like I said, when we were talking about it before, I'm interested to see if they can shore things up, and on top of everything else, they have a new coach. Which you're not sure how well the kids who have been learning a certain system for so long are gonna do with new terminology and a new way of looking at things. So he's right. I'm curious to see how Kent Roosevelt does as well.
Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about here was which teams that we think have a chance of breaking into that top 5 in the poll. Scott, I know you have one team in particular that's sort of the annual enigma of the PD or the cleveland.com top 25.
Yeah, Glenville, I think, is a team that could certainly end up in the top 5. They're like most years, they're going to be good. You're never sure how good. And this year, I think, is no exception because you have a lot of new faces in there. Now they have a lot of kids who got a lot of experience even during the playoff run, but now they're in spots where they're either the new starter or they're somebody who the other team is going to have the game plan for. Or at least they want them to be. So. Glenville, I think, is a team that can certainly move up. I think a lot will have to do with how they do in their first 3 games. As usual, those are kind of how you gauge Glenville because their non-conference opponents are usually really good, and they've had such success for so long in the Senate that those first 3 games kind of usually tell the tale with Glenville.
Okay. I just want a quick reminder, is the last call for maybe any comments or questions you might have. #NEOVarsity on Twitter. Jump in the comments on this post. Feel free, after we're done here, this video will be archived. You can watch it leave comments in the post, and we'll respond to as many as we can. Also, a reminder, during the regular season, Monday afternoons, this top 25 poll will be rolled out every Monday, so look for that. We'll reveal it with a live show, and we're also going to go to Tuesday and Wednesday for the Division 3 and the Division 3-4 and the Division 5-6-7 polls. Really quickly, did we want to mention any teams? Interesting question came up when we were discussing this. Looking at some of these schedules, any teams that you think can go undefeated during the regular season based on?
Well, outside of Kirtland, who's done it for a few years now, and maybe I think Avon is a choice there. They've done it in recent years, and I mean, other than them, St. Edward, I don't know. They certainly have the talent to play the tough schedule that they have, but if you look at who they play, I mean, in the last 3 weeks, you have Eastern Christian, Moeller, and St. Ignatius, which doesn't matter how good a record St. Ignatius has. I think last year proved that that game could go either way any year. So I think maybe the top choices are probably Avon and Kirtland.
Okay. Well, that'll just about do it here for the top 25 poll show. Again, look for our polls to roll out on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday during the regular season. Scott, thanks a lot, and I think, looking forward to this season. Really exciting to see how this poll develops and changes throughout the season. And there might be a team out there that we have no idea that they're going to make it in, and they could be in our top 5. So, thanks, and continue watching here on cleveland.com.